Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita. Today, we're diving into a fascinating set of readings. These are actually the Session 1 materials from the Virtual Summer School in Entrepreneurship Research for 2025.
It's remarkable, really. This will be the 5th year of this no-fee summer school, a truly unique initiative that started back in 2021.
Absolutely. And we need to give a huge thank you to the people who made it happen. Professor Vishal K. Gupta and PhD candidate Athena Skiadopoulou, both from the University of Alabama. Their dedication to making this kind of, in-depth learning accessible is truly commendable.
Indeed. And our deep dive today will pull out the key nuggets from these readings. We're going to explore who exactly gets studied in entrepreneurship research, how the field is currently evolving, and the significant impact it's having on other areas of academic study.
Right.
We'll also be looking closely at how we even define what counts as a new organization. So think of this as your shortcut to understanding some really pivotal ideas in the field.
Okay, let's unpack this. One of the foundational questions we need to address is, when we talk about entrepreneurship research, whose stories are we actually telling? The 2024 paper by Hwang and colleagues makes a really thought-provoking argument.
Yeah.
They suggest that top management journals have disproportionately focused on what they term elite entrepreneurs.
And what's interesting to consider is that this focus on elite entrepreneurs often isn't like a deliberate choice, but rather a consequence of the research tools we typically use.
Yeah.
How
so?
Well, our methodologies tend to naturally select for incorporated businesses, companies operating in high-tech or knowledge-intensive sectors, and ventures that have attracted specific types of funding, like venture capital. It's almost like our research radar is tuned to a very specific kind of entrepreneurial signal.
Right, so our methods might unintentionally be creating a filter. And the consequence, as Hwang et al. Point out, is that our understanding of entrepreneurship might have some significant blind spots. The theories we develop might not fully resonate with the experiences of entrepreneurs from marginalized populations, who often navigate very different labor markets and might launch fundamentally different kinds of businesses, think sole proprietorships or ventures born out of necessity. The core insight here is that our understanding might be like looking at the startup world through, a keyhole, only seeing a very specific, often privileged type of venture.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises a really important question about how broadly applicable our current theories actually are. The U.S. 2022 Small Business Profile throws up some compelling numbers.
Like what?
Businesses with no employees, non-employer firms, they accounted for a massive 81% of all businesses. 81%.
Ah.
And if we look back a little, around 60% of self-employed individuals in 2015 were unincorporated. This suggests a huge amount of entrepreneurial activity that might be largely invisible in, the top-tier management research.
Exactly. And the paper also highlights how fixating on things like venture capital as a defining characteristic further narrows our view. It's almost as if we're implicitly saying, if you haven't secured this specific type of investment, are you really the kind of entrepreneur we study?
Right.
But isn't it important to study the high-growth ventures that create the most jobs and innovation? Why should we focus on smaller, maybe less impactful businesses?
Well, that's a valid question. And high-growth ventures are undoubtedly important, no question. But focusing solely on them can lead to a skewed understanding of the broader entrepreneurial landscape. Many entrepreneurs, particularly those from marginalized communities, they might prioritize different goals, right? Like providing for their families or serving their local communities. Their contributions might not always show up in traditional metrics like, rapid growth or VC funding. But they are still vital forms of economic activity. Plus, understanding the challenges and successes of these diverse entrepreneurs can actually refine and strengthen our core theories by testing their boundaries and identifying, necessary nuances.
That makes sense. So this brings us to why including marginalized populations in entrepreneurship research isn't just about equity, although that's certainly a crucial aspect. Hwang et al. Argue that it's essential for making our conceptual frameworks more robust and understanding the true limits of our existing theories on employment and entrepreneurship.
And what's interesting is that even within top management journals, there's a growing recognition of this need. Table 1 in their paper actually points to 14 notable studies published after 2015 that specifically examine this intersection, entrepreneurship, employment, and marginalized populations.
Oh, okay.
And for studies within the U.S. context, the focus is even more recent, like post-2020.
And this table showcases a really interesting range of groups being studied, right? I saw research focusing on gender, immigration status, LGBTQ plus identity, racial minorities, refugees, and individuals facing educational disadvantages.
That's correct. However, the paper also points out a concentration of research on certain groups, like gender.
Yeah, I noticed that.
While others, such as racial minorities, people with disabilities, or individuals with criminal records, remain comparatively under-researched. So that definitely highlights potential areas where future research could make significant contributions and broaden our understanding.
Yeah, for sure. The paper also puts forward some really compelling questions for future research. They're pushing us to consider how employment histories, labor market structures, and maybe prior entrepreneurial experiences might shape the entrepreneurial journeys of marginalized individuals in ways that differ from the elite entrepreneurs we've often focused on.
And this raises an important question about the assumptions we often make, doesn't it? For instance, how do the types of employment experiences more commonly faced by marginalized individuals relate to phenomena like, say, hybrid entrepreneurship? Where someone juggles a wage job with running their own venture.
Right, or are the underlying motivations for working in small firms the same for individuals from different socioeconomic backgrounds? Probably not always. And I found this question particularly insightful. How do systemic biases, the ones present in the wider economy, affect how high-performing individuals from marginalized groups perceive the risks and rewards of starting their own businesses? They might feel they have more to lose by leaving a stable job, especially if they've succeeded against the odds already.
Precisely. It really underscores the need to move beyond simplistic, kind of one-size-fits-all models of entrepreneurship and to develop more nuanced and context-sensitive theories.
Okay.
Now, shifting our focus a bit, the next set of readings tackles a more fundamental question. How do we even identify and define new organizations when we're conducting research?
Yes. This brings us to the seminal 1988 paper by Katz and Gartner. Their argument is that a lot of research relies on what they call samples of convenience, things like newly incorporated businesses or corporate spin-offs, and that this approach might not capture the full spectrum of genuinely new organizational activity. We could be missing a significant portion of the new organizations, those in their very earliest stages.
Right, the ones just starting out. And what's fascinating here is their proposition of 4 key properties that can help us identify these emerging organizations in a more comprehensive way.
Okay, what are they?
The first is intentionality. The clear and purposeful desire to create a new organization. This reflects the goals of the founders and also the influences of the surrounding environment. Think of the moment someone decides, okay, I'm going to create a tutoring service and actually starts laying the groundwork.
Got it. Intentionality. What's next?
Then we have resources, which is fairly intuitive. It's the process of acquiring and deploying all the necessary inputs, personnel, capital, raw materials, whatever's needed. This is about getting the funding, the initial team, the essential tools to operate.
Makes sense. Resources.
The third property is boundary. This is the point at which the organization begins to be perceived and recognized as a distinct entity, separate from its founders and the broader environment. This could be the moment it gets a formal legal structure, like incorporating, or a unique brand, or even its own dedicated workspace.
Okay, a distinct identity, boundary, and the last one.
And finally, exchange the ongoing cycles of transactions that occur both within the organization and with the external world. So providing goods or services to customers, interacting with suppliers, that sort of thing. This signifies that the organization is actively engaging with its environment.
Intentionality, resources, boundary, exchange.
Okay. And what's crucial to understand, they argue, is that these 4 properties might not all emerge simultaneously. Katz and Gartner suggest that researchers can strategically use one or more of these as a starting point, as a kind of sampling frame, to study organizations literally as they're being formed.
And their Table 1 provides some really practical examples of how researchers have used these properties, right?
Exactly. For intentionality, they mention analyzing newspaper advertisements placed by aspiring restaurateurs, people declaring their intent.
Okay.
For resources, examining the investment portfolios of venture capitalists, tracking where the money is flowing.
Right.
Obtaining a tax identification number could indicate the establishment of a boundary.
Yeah, a formal step.
And looking at unemployment insurance records could signal the initiation of exchange, perhaps as individuals leave previous employment to start something new.
Interesting. So if we connect this back to the limitations we discussed with the Hwang et al. Paper, it becomes pretty evident that relying solely on formal incorporation, which is essentially just one boundary indicator, could indeed lead us to overlook a substantial amount of early-stage entrepreneurial activity, especially among marginalized populations who might operate informally for longer before formalizing.
Absolutely. The key takeaway here is that newness isn't just about formal registration. It's a dynamic process involving intention, resource assembly, boundary creation, and exchange. It's more complex.
Okay, so we've explored who gets studied and how we define the new. Now let's broaden our lens even further. The final paper we're diving into today, by Thurik and colleagues in 2024, examines the impact that entrepreneurship research has had on other academic disciplines. And, well, it turns out, it's a compelling story of intellectual cross-pollination.
It really is.
Yeah.
What's interesting to note is how, after a period where entrepreneurship research often drew upon theories and methodologies from established fields like economics, psychology, sociology.
Right, borrowing from them.
We're now seeing a significant reciprocal flow. Other disciplines are increasingly adopting perspectives and insights that have originated in entrepreneurship research. It's like a payback development, as they put it.
That's fascinating. The paper provides some really good examples. Let's start with clinical psychology. Entrepreneurship research has offered a fresh perspective on conditions like ADHD.
How so?
Well, instead of solely focusing on potential negative occupational consequences, it's exploring how certain traits associated with ADHD might actually be advantageous in entrepreneurial careers, like maybe some level of impulsivity or hyperfocus can be a benefit.
That's a key question, isn't it? It prompts clinical psychology to consider potential strengths and has even spurred new research into entrepreneurial intentions and outcomes among individuals with ADHD. It changes the frame.
Another compelling area is occupational health. Entrepreneurship, as the paper describes it, often represents an extreme work environment.
Extreme how?
Think about the long and unpredictable hours, the inherent uncertainty, the blurring of lines between professional and personal life, many of the characteristics we associate with the future of work, but often amplified for entrepreneurs.
Okay. So by studying entrepreneurs, occupational health researchers can gain valuable insights into the health and well-being implications of this evolving work landscape. Entrepreneurship research is highlighting novel stressors and coping mechanisms that might not be as apparent in traditional employment settings. And it's also shedding light on the potential trade-offs between professional thriving and personal strain.
It's almost as if entrepreneurship serves as a real-world laboratory for understanding the future of work and its impact on our health. The paper also delves into the influence on the field of culture, demonstrating how entrepreneurship, particularly high-impact ventures, can actively shape societal norms in both formal and informal institutions.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, it suggests that entrepreneurship is more than just an economic engine. It's a significant cultural force. The authors provide examples of how entrepreneurial activities can contribute to the development of industry clusters and even the cultivation of supportive local ecosystems.
Right, shaping the environment around them.
Right.
Then we have industrial organization, which is a branch of economics.
Okay.
Entrepreneurship research has introduced some significant disruptions here by emphasizing the critical role of new entrants and innovative firms in challenging established market structures. Traditional models often focused on the behavior of large incumbent firms.
Yeah, the big players.
But entrepreneurship research highlights the distinct innovation and competitive strategies employed by smaller, newer ventures.
So it challenges the more static, equilibrium-focused view often found in traditional I/O, and introduces a much-needed dynamic perspective, acknowledging the constant churn driven by entrepreneurial activity and new entrants.
Exactly. Even macroeconomics is feeling the influence. The paper argues that entrepreneurship research is advocating for a more behaviorally grounded definition of entrepreneurship, viewing entrepreneurs as proactive agents of change within the economy.
Agents of change.
This shift could lead to more accurate and insightful models for understanding the aggregate impact of entrepreneurship on economic performance.
What's interesting there is the ongoing effort to develop a universally accepted definition of an entrepreneur that can be effectively integrated into macro models.
Yeah.
It's tricky. But the growing recognition of entrepreneurs as key drivers of innovation and economic dynamism definitely offers promising avenues for future research.
And perhaps one of the most tangible impacts has been on policy research. The paper describes a real transformation in public policy thinking.
How so?
moving from a relative neglect of entrepreneurship to a current prioritization of ambitious, impact-oriented deep tech entrepreneurship as a vital engine for job creation, innovation, competitiveness, and even solutions to pressing societal challenges. So, this research isn't just academic, it's actually shaping the kind of support and resources that might be available to entrepreneurs.
That's a powerful illustration, isn't it? How rigorous academic inquiry can directly inform and influence real-world policy decisions. The increasing recognition of the multifaceted contributions of entrepreneurship has led to significant shifts in government priorities and the design of support mechanisms.
Definitely. Finally, the paper touches on the field of finance, highlighting how entrepreneurship research has spurred the development of entrepreneurial finance.
Right, because traditional finance theories often fell short in explaining the unique funding needs and investment characteristics of innovative high-growth ventures, didn't they?
Exactly. That gap led to the emergence of research on venture capital, angel investment, and crowdfunding, all critical for supporting entrepreneurial endeavors.
And this again demonstrates how entrepreneurship research can identify the limitations of existing frameworks in other disciplines and catalyze the development of new, more relevant approaches. The rise of crowdfunding as a significant area of research, often pioneered in entrepreneurship journals, is a prime example of this intellectual cross-fertilization.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what are the key takeaways for you, our listener, from our exploration of these 4 important papers from the virtual summer school in entrepreneurship research?
Well, synthesizing the main points, I think it's clear that entrepreneurship research is a vibrant and constantly evolving field, is moving towards a more inclusive understanding of who entrepreneurs are, acknowledging the diversity beyond just the elite profile.
Right.
We're also gaining a more sophisticated understanding of how new organizations actually come into being, looking beyond simple metrics like incorporation. And perhaps most significantly, we're seeing the increasing and substantial impact of entrepreneurship research across a whole spectrum of academic disciplines, and crucially, in shaping public policy.
It really underscores why engaging with this kind of research is so valuable, especially if you're interested in understanding the forces that are shaping the business world and, well, society at large today.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider. Reflecting on these insights, what are some overlooked areas or populations within the realm of entrepreneurship that you believe warrant greater research attention? Consider how a more comprehensive and inclusive understanding of entrepreneurship could lead to more robust theories and ultimately more impactful solutions to the challenges we face.
That's a powerful question to ponder.
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.